Music as a medium is one of the most powerful forms of expression man has at its disposal. Whether it is a ballad spawned from an overwhelming feeling of love, such as Whitney Houston's I Will Always Love You, or a way to express the high-powered feeling of youthful energy like early skate punk bands such as JFA, music generally comes from a place of emotional inspiration, but it can express much more than just a feeling. And in certain situations, it can be an anthem of change. In 1969, John Fogerty of the short-lived band Clearwater Creedence Revival would write and release the song Fortunate Son as an expression of protest against the ongoing American war in Vietnam. The song famously critiques how ordinary young men from across the country were being forced to fight and die in a war in a faraway land that we should have had no involvement in because the government had decided it was going to happen. But the same senators and political leaders' children were often able to avoid being drafted into the horrible conflict. Fortunate Son and CCR would go on to somewhat be the anthem of the anti-war movement for years to come within the United States. It has frequently been used in post-Vietnam War era films that critique the conflict in their own ways. Many other songs from the era shared a similar message with politically charged lyrics that fueled the anti-war and on a larger scale anti-government movements domestically in the US during the era. But of course the United States is not the only place where music can be a form of protest. Interestingly enough, the music doesn't even need to be a direct critique of political climate to pose a threat to a governing regime. Sometimes the artist's popularity providing a platform to express their political beliefs can be a threat in and of itself. Around the same time as these anti-war anthems played across the United States, there was another musician creating problems for his government at home, all the way across the world in Lagos, Nigeria. He was at the forefront of a new form of African music, playing shows with famous members of bands from the West and building a political movement in his cultish commune. And his name was Fela Kuti. Fela was born into a Nigerian upper-middle-class family in 1938, and from early in his life, a political presence was destined for him. His mother was an avid anti-colonial feminist, and his father was an Anglican minister and the first president of the Nigeria Union of Teachers. Both of his parents would play roles in the anti-colonial movement, with his mother famously leading the Abeokuta riots of 1946. Both of his siblings became medical doctors that were nationally renowned, and it was safe to say that Fela came from quite the brilliant family, and he would go on to be brilliant in his own way. In 1958, Fela would move to London with his younger brother and attend the Trinity College of Music. With his preferred instrument being the trumpet, Fela would start his early music career, creating his first band called Kula Lobitos, which would set the tone of his interesting style of jazz fusion which would follow. After living abroad for a few years, Nigeria, who had been under the British colonial rule, was granted freedom in 1963, which resulted in many residents returning home from England. Fela would work with the new Nigerian government as a radio broadcaster, along with reforming his band in Lagos. Over the next few years, Fela would pioneer one of the most interesting forms of jazz to have ever existed. He combined his Western training with traditional West African music. Fela and his band would slowly create the genre today known as Afrobeat, which I want to clarify is different than Afrobeats with an S, which is popular today and kind of sounds like reggaeton music. Anyways, Afrobeat was something special. It fused traditional Nigerian and Ghanaian polyrhythmic music staples with Western jazz and funk, and it would become extremely popular in West Africa, even gaining recognition abroad too. The music worked well with the changing landscape of Nigeria. Lagos in particular had become a major industrialized city in Africa, and after decades of colonial rule, their culture had become influenced by the West as well. Afrobeat encapsulated these changes perfectly. It was rooted in a traditional song, but integrated the sounds of the changing world, and it was produced and distributed by modern technology in their homeland of Lagos, Nigeria. To the people of Nigeria and West Africa at large, it represented a deeper message, the message essentially being that their culture can adapt and even thrive in this new modern world. Fela and his band would gain national notoriety. They performed at the top venues in Lagos to sold-out crowds. This fame would eventually attract the attention of figures in the West. In 1969, Fela and his band would fly out to Los Angeles, California for a small tour with hopes of recording while there as well. The band would stay in Los Angeles for 10 months. While there, they performed several shows, exploring different forms of new American jazz, exchanging music ideas, recording their first album, but also exploring some different realms of thought. An African-American musician and activist by the name of Sandra Isidore, born Sandra Smith, would be introduced to Fela at some point during his stay. Sandra was one of the earliest American acts for Afrobeat and is today cited as the mother of the genre next to Kuti as the father. Aside from exchanging musical philosophy, Sandra and Fela would exchange much thought on modern politics as well. Sandra was deeply connected to the Black Panther Party in the United States, an armed revolutionary political movement that promoted Black empowerment. Fela would be introduced to this concept and its thinkers such as Malcolm X and Angela Davis, and this exposure would permanently alter both Fela's music and his political views for the rest of his life.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Eventually, Fela and his now renamed band, Africa 70, would be deported back to Nigeria after a promoter tipped off the immigrations and customs that they had been staying in the country illegally for some time. And in those short 10 months, Fela returned a different man. Kuti, being the premier musician of Nigeria at the time, carried a lot of fame and power, enough so that the drummer of the British band Cream, Ginger Baker, would come down to live and record with Fela, resulting in one of the most insane crossovers in jazz history. Kuti would open up a now infamous nightclub called the Afro Shrine. It became the premier location for Afrobeat and Nigerian bands to perform in the country. But more importantly, Fela would also open up the Calcutta Republic, a communal compound that would serve as a home for Fela, his bandmates, his family, their families, a recording studio, and even a free health clinic for its locals, and the housing point for his political beliefs and movement. Fela's fame and popularity continued to grow. He started to perform his songs in Pidgin English as a means to bypass localized language barriers across Africa, and as his fame grew, so did his voice on the state of African politics. During the 1970s, political corruption was one of the largest issues facing young African nations, and Nigeria was home to some of the deepest corruption in the continent. Fela openly called out the systemic corruption of his government and mistreatment of the Nigerian people. He criticized the rigging of elections and military coups that were causing widespread poverty and crime throughout his nation. His 1976 album and song titled Zombie may have been one of his most direct forms of protest against his government, with the album depicting him singing to a wall of soldiers, and the lyrics of the song describing soldiers as zombies that only perform and act once they're told to do so. And these critiques did not go unnoticed. Throughout the 1970s, Fela would have constant run-ins with the law, being arrested over 200 times, which led to this sort of tug-of-war with his government. The more they harassed him, the more he would harass them back with his music. Fela continued to become a more and more extreme person overall throughout the 70s. Aside from his radical political views and activism, Fela displayed a radical view on music and a militant-like control over those in his personal life. He had a rule for his band at their live shows that they wouldn't play songs already recorded on a record. This would lead to constantly angry crowds rioting in the venues when they wouldn't perform their favorite song live. He would relentlessly chastise his band members for even the smallest mistakes, even handing out fines if he found it necessary. And he would humiliate anyone that would speak to women around them, essentially setting an unspoken standard that the women at the shows were only for him. All the while, he controlled his commune Calcutta Republic almost like a dictator. He declared that Calcutta was to be an independent state from the Nigerian government, and that it was essentially under his rule. He decided who could stay and who would be kicked out, what the rules were and how to enforce them, what was allowed to happen, who was allowed to have relations with who. He would even give out physical punishments, such as lashings or being held in a bootleg prison cell within the compound. With a continuously growing following, Fela as a political activist became more and more apparent as a threat to the corrupt leaders of the Nigerian government. After his release of the aforementioned song and album Zombie in '76, the Nigerian government had had enough of him and his independent nation commune. A military leader named General Obasanjo would be the one to take matters into his own hands. Obviously, Fela's 200 arrests had not done enough, and all of this would culminate in the February of 1977. 1,000 soldiers from the Nigerian army would storm the Calcutta Republic, beating residents, arresting many, and even killing Fela's mother after throwing her out of a second-story window. At the end of the raid, the Calcutta Republic was burned to the ground. But Kuti only continued to go off the deep end after this. On the one-year anniversary of the burning, Fela would marry 27 of his backup singers as a form of remembrance for the event. More than likely, the real reason for the marriage was to combat the claims that he had been kidnapping women for his shows. Later that year, Kuti would also be banned from Ghana after inciting riots after playing Zombie at one of his shows there. From this point on, Fela's political career continued, but with not as much traction. He attempted to form his own political party in 1979, but it was quickly blocked. In 1983, in Nigeria's first election in years, Fela would nominate himself, but again was quickly shut down. Around this time, he reformed his band in Egypt with the name The Egypt 80, whose main ideological claim was that all of Egyptian society, its knowledge, philosophy, mathematics, and religious systems are African and must be claimed as such. He was also an avid critic of the Egyptian government during his stay, which resulted in a 20-month jailing sentence in 1983. He continued to be an avid political proponent for African nations and anti-colonialism up until his death in 1997. For the last few years of his life, he had refused treatment for an unknown disease. After his passing, his son would reveal that Fela had died from AIDS, a disease which he had openly denied the existence of for years. Fela Kuti is one of my personal favorite musicians. The music he created throughout his lifetime really cannot be matched by anything. But when I learned his story, it almost made sense. Fela was a lot of things, good and bad. He was far from perfect, but he was an innovator and a political activist whose story is really out of this world. Thank you for watching. If you're still here, consider liking and subscribing and whatnot. Thanks everyone for getting me above 10,000 subs.
I am also going to be starting a Patreon. I will not be posting video content, so to say, on the Patreon, but what will be included is a bi-weekly newsletter and potentially a magazine, a physical magazine that will be mailed out every 6 months or so. And if you subscribe to the Patreon, you will be listed in the credits of my video as a producer. So, yeah, thank you for watching again. Email me something schizophrenic, please. Goodbye.